You perceive the world uniquely because you do not simply look, you truly see. A vast chasm exists between these two acts. The empath's eyes are not mere organs of sight. They are extensions of the spirit, apertures through which the collective unconscious breathes into individual awareness. To exist as an empath is to dwell at the frontier between your soul and the world's dream. It is to stand where illumination meets darkness, where delight morphs into grief, where the line between self and other melts into something logic cannot contain. In my exploration of the human psyche, I found what we name empathy is not a basic moral quality, nor mere emotional receptivity. It is an archetypal manifestation, an expression of the primordial principle of connection linking all life. The empath is not a kindly person in the conventional sense. The empath is a vessel of the self, the totality of consciousness and unconscious striving for wholeness. When you sense another's anguish as your own, you are not consuming their suffering. You are meeting your own shadow reflected in the mirror of their being. The world for the empath is a shoreless ocean. The ordinary person constructs his home upon the solid ground of his own ego. But the empath floats, sensing emotional tides, hearing pleas beneath speech, feeling the unseen frameworks binding society. To others, this may seem like fragility, yet in truth, it is an ancient summons, the load borne by those whose consciousness has worn thin enough for the unconscious light to seep through. Empaths do not merely exist. They partake in being. They are both performers and spectators in the soul's eternal play. Their tears are not frailty, but right. Each one a baptism into the deeper waters of human truth. And yet such depth exacts a toll. For to perceive the unseen currents of others is to risk submersion within them. You see, empathy and individuation are two counter movements requiring balance. Individuation seeks to define the self, to stand firm against the collective wave, to declare I am. Empathy, conversely, dissolves borders. It declares we are. The empath thus lives forever in this strain between the call to merge and the call to separate. Too much merging and they disappear into others' feelings. Too much separation and they lose the divine mirror in which the soul knows itself. The empath's path is not to flee this tension, but to weave it, to become conscious within the field of sensation. When you feel another's grief, it is not random. It is an opening. The sorrow that touches you vibrates because it mirrors a frequency within your own unconscious. You cannot feel what is not already stirring within you. Therefore, when you claim I am an empath, what you truly mean is I have grown aware that my borders are porous, that the world lives within me as I live within it. This awareness can lead to agony if one lacks structure. Yet it can lead to enlightenment if one learns to hold the opposites, to stay present in love without losing the self within it. There's a secret I wish to share, something rarely grasped. Empathy is not acquired. It is recalled. It is the echo of a primordial unity, a time before the ego was born, when all beings shared creation's single breath. In dreams, this ancient memory returns. The empath walks through life half in waking, half in dream, bearing this memory like a silent hymn. That is why another's pain feels known, for it is. Yet to dwell constantly in this field of resonance is draining. The empath often withdraws not from the world, but from the noise drowning truth's whisper. They yearn for solitude, not from dislike of people, but because they must return to the self-center, to the sacred inner space where feeling becomes knowing. Many empaths mistake compassion for compliance. They believe to be kind is to absorb, to pardon ceaselessly, to serve without pause. But compassion without consciousness becomes self-erasure. True empathy must include discernment, the awareness that to feel is not to repair, and to understand is not to yield. One must ask, whose emotion is this? Whose suffering do I carry? In analytical psychology, we might say the empath's greatest labor is to differentiate the ego from the wounded healer archetype. This archetype, embodied in figures like Chiron, holds the power to heal others through one's own injuries, yet also holds the lure to wholly identify with pain, to make one's suffering a crusade. Many empaths unknowingly live as unconscious healers, driven to restore balance in others while neglecting themselves. But healing is not martyrdom. It is equilibrium. When you learn to feel without becoming, to witness without absorbing, to love without losing, then empathy transforms from curse to gift. You cease being a sponge and become a mirror. You reflect truth rather than drowning in it. This metamorphosis demands confronting the shadow. For every empathic soul carries a hidden counterpart, the suppressed wish to not feel. This shadow surfaces as coldness, detachment, or even cruelty, and often shocks the empath when it appears in dreams or sudden urges. Yet this darkness is not evil. It is compensation. The psyche, in its wisdom, always seeks balance. When one side dominates, here, the empathic side, the unconscious generates the opposite to restore equilibrium. To integrate this means to accept you too have limits, that not every suffering is yours to hold. The empath who refuses to set boundaries becomes a bottomless vessel. They pour themselves out endlessly until nothing remains. The universe does not ask you to feel everything. It asks you to become conscious of what you feel and why. Let me address you, then, as if we stood in that great hall of silence where the unconscious listens. Close your eyes and envision the world as a vast energy field, each person a note in the symphony of being. When you enter a room, your soul senses the dissonance or harmony of those notes. This is not imagination. It is perception beyond the senses. You are reading the emotional field, the unseen geometry of souls. But recall, the moment you identify with another's note as your own, you lose your melody. You must hear the symphony, not become it. Dreams often reveal this truth symbolically. I once studied a patient who dreamt of walking through a forest filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflected not her image, but the faces of strangers crying, laughing, terrified. She said she felt responsible for them all. When she tried to comfort one reflection, it shattered and she awoke in panic. The dream, of course, was her unconscious showing the danger of over-identification. The mirrors symbolized the people whose emotions she absorbed, and the shattering was the breaking of psychic boundaries. To heal, she needed to see the mirrors as both her and not her. This paradox is empathy's core. You must see yourself in the other, yet remain aware you are not the other. Only then can compassion become a bridge, not a prison. Empaths see the world uniquely because they see it symbolically. They sense the archetypal patterns behind events, the myths replaying in human lives. When a friend weeps, the empath does not merely hear personal sorrow. They perceive the archetype of the abandoned child, the universal story of loss and longing. They recognize in every heartbreak the collective wound of humanity. That is why empathy feels sacred. It touches something eternal. Yet such perception isolates. How can one live among those who speak only of surfaces when you have seen beneath them? The empath often feels alien, misunderstood, even cursed. They sense falseness in words, hidden motives in smiles, loneliness behind laughter. They cannot unsee what they see. So they learn silence, not as retreat, but as reverence. For to speak of the depths is to risk being devoured by shallow misunderstanding. Still, a time arrives when the empath must return to the world not as victim, but as bridge. The world needs those who feel deeply, but it needs them awake, not drowning. To be awake as an empath means to transform sensitivity into wisdom. It means to hold pain as one holds a candle, firmly yet gently, letting its light reveal but not burn. The true empath does not absorb emotion. They transmute it like an alchemist. They turn lead into gold, suffering into insight, chaos into understanding. But this alchemy requires the fire of self-awareness. Without it, empathy becomes codependence. With it, empathy becomes illumination. You must grasp the empath's power is not emotional, but spiritual. Feeling deeply is only the surface of a far deeper truth, the capacity to see soul in everything. Empathy is the eye of the self looking through human limitation. It is divinity experiencing itself through human tenderness. That is why it hurts, for divinity filtered through flesh burns. Yet through this burning, something magnificent emerges: consciousness. The more you feel, the more you awaken, if you dare remain aware amidst the pain. This is the empath's path, not to escape feeling, but to sanctify it, to turn each sensation into a revelation of truth. The empath's soul stands as a threshold between two worlds, the conscious and the unconscious, the personal and the collective, the visible and the invisible. What others call sensitivity, I call the psyche's porosity, a membrane so thin the voices of the unseen pass through effortlessly. These voices are not hallucinations. They are the ancient murmurs of the collective unconscious, the living archive of humanity's myth, emotion, and forgotten experience. When you, as an empath, enter a space, you are not simply walking into a room. You are stepping into the psychic residue of every thought, fear, and hope ever felt there. Each place holds memory, for the unconscious is not confined to individuals. It breathes through environments, through symbols, through history itself. That is why certain places make you weep without knowing why, or why some people's presence exhausts you while others lift your spirit. You are reading the psychic field, what ancient mystics call the aura, what I would describe as the living dream of matter itself. You must understand what you perceive is real, but not literal. The empath's vision is symbolic. The shadow in another's smile, the heaviness in a handshake, the silence after a word. These are not coincidences, but symbols, fragments of a dream playing out in waking life. The empath is therefore a dream interpreter moving through daylight. You see patterns where others see events. You feel archetypes where others see individuals. You stand in awe of the divine architecture shaping every encounter. But such vision, if not grounded, becomes unbearable. Many empaths, overwhelmed by emotion's density, try to numb their perception. They escape into distraction, overthinking, or spiritual idealism, believing if they remain only in light, they will not drown. But this is illusion. Light without shadow blinds. To survive as an empath, you must make peace with darkness, not evil, but the fertile darkness of the soul where transformation begins. I recall a patient who described her empathy as a curse. She said she could feel the grief of strangers on the subway, the anxiety of coworkers, even ancestral restlessness in her dreams. She felt invaded, consumed. In her analysis, I told her, "You're not feeling their emotions. You are awakening to the world's pain within you." The boundary between her and the world was dissolving so she could participate in a larger process of consciousness awakening to itself. That realization terrified her, as it terrifies many who awaken beyond the personal. But eventually she understood her sensitivity was a sacred language, not a disease. The unconscious was speaking through feeling, and empathy was the translator. Once she stopped fighting the emotion and began listening to its message, her suffering turned into clarity. Every emotion you feel from another contains a seed, an archetype, a pattern seeking recognition. The empath is called to name that pattern, to give it consciousness. When you sense another's fear, ask not why are they afraid, but what archetype is expressing itself through this fear. Perhaps it is the fear of the child, the insecurity of the orphan, the rage of the warrior denied. Each emotion is a messenger. When you understand this, empathy becomes revelation. The modern world, however, does not honor empaths. It glorifies efficiency, logic, and separation, values of the intellect denying feelings wisdom. So the empath becomes the exile of the modern psyche. They wander through a world deaf to emotion, trying to explain a language no one remembers. But I tell you, humanity's future depends on the empath. For only those who feel can heal. Only those who see through illusion can restore balance to a fragmented civilization. But empathy must evolve. It cannot remain sentimental. It must become conscious. The New Age empath will not merely feel others' pain. They will read it, transform it, mirror it back with clarity. They will hold the world's wounds as a sacred fire, not to be extinguished, but to be transmuted. In your dreams, this alchemy is already occurring. Many empaths dream of floods, drowning, waves overtaking cities. These are not mere anxieties. They are symbols of emotion, the unconscious rising into awareness. If in your dream you learn to float, it means you are learning to remain conscious within feeling. If you're swept away, it means you still resist. Water in dreams is the realm of emotion, of empathy itself. The dream teaches the only way not to drown is to surrender, but with awareness. You might also dream of carrying others, lost children, wounded animals, dying loved ones. These are fragments of the collective unconscious seeking refuge in your psyche. But you cannot save them by holding them. You must return them to the light of awareness by naming, by understanding, by accepting their pain is not yours to fix. The moment you bring consciousness to the feeling, it dissolves back into the wholeness from which it came. This is individuation's essence, the process by which the human becomes whole. For the empath, individuation means integrating the feeling function without being possessed by it. It means realizing empathy is not about absorbing others, but awakening to interconnectedness. You are not a separate being who feels too much. You are the universe feeling itself through a human form. Yet the ego resists this truth. It fears dissolution. It clings to separateness. So the empath's greatest suffering comes from the battle between the ego's need for self and the soul's longing for unity. You feel torn because you are, and that tearing is sacred. It is the ego's crucifixion preceding resurrection into consciousness. Do not rush to heal this tension. Stay within it. Let it shape you. For the empath, sensitivity is the very crucible through which the soul expands. In your ability to feel what others cannot, you are exploring the outer edges of human awareness. You are evolution's frontier, the experiment through which consciousness tests its own boundaries. But you must guard your energy not as a fortress, but as a temple. A fortress defends through fear. A temple protects through reverence. Each emotion entering your awareness must be treated as a visitor, not a master. You may open the door, listen, learn, and then let it go. This is the conscious empath's discipline, hospitality without possession. When overwhelmed, return to nature. The trees do not apologize for sensitivity to sunlight. The river does not lament reflecting the sky. They exist in balance because they flow with the greater rhythm. Likewise, you must flow, feeling deeply yet anchored in the eternal. Meditation, solitude, silence. These are not escapes, but recalibrations. They tune you back to your own frequency. There's another danger, the empath's unconscious pride. To feel deeply can create subtle superiority, the belief one understands more, sees more, loves more. But this is the ego's trap disguised as virtue. True empathy has no arrogance, for it knows sensitivity is not earned. It is given. You did not choose to feel the world. The world chose you to feel it. Therefore, humility is your protection. I have often said no tree can reach heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. The empath must dare descend into the unconscious to meet the primal, instinctive, shadowed parts of feeling. Only then can compassion become complete. Otherwise, empathy remains sentimental, a preference for light over dark, which is not love but avoidance. To love truly is to embrace all, the beauty and the terror, the joy and the decay, the divine and the monstrous. If you look deeply into your heart, you will find what you call overwhelm is not caused by others' emotions, but by your resistance to your own depth. The feelings of others trigger the unhealed parts of yourself. The pain you absorb is the pain you have not yet faced. Therefore, every empathic experience is an initiation, an invitation to enter another layer of your own unconscious. To see the world differently, as an empath does, is both gift and burden. But it is also destiny. You were not made for the shallows. You were born for depth. The world you perceive is not broken. It is alive. Every vibration, every sigh, every silence has meaning. You are decoding existence's language itself. Do not seek to close your eyes. Learn to see consciously. When you feel sorrow in another, bow inwardly. You are witnessing the divine, remembering itself. When you feel joy, rejoice without clinging. You are touching eternity in motion. When you feel nothing, when empathy falls silent, do not panic. Even silence is communication. The self rests after revealing too much. Empaths see the world differently because they do not see with the eyes. They see with the soul. They live between dimensions, half human, half myth. Theirs is the oracle's sight, the healer's heart, the mystic's solitude. But they must walk the human path fully, eat, rest, cry, love. For only through human experience can divine perception find meaning. When I speak of empathy, I speak of the union of opposites, feeling and thinking, self and other, heaven and earth. The empath is the living bridge, and every bridge must endure the tension of both sides pulling at once. But through this tension, transformation occurs. You are not meant to fix the world, dear empath. You are meant to feel it into awareness. You're the mirror through which the unconscious sees itself. And in that seeing, healing begins, quietly, invisibly, inevitably. Every empath carries the imprint of an ancient archetype, the wounded healer. It is one of the oldest patterns known to the human soul, predating language, religion, civilization itself. It represents the paradox that only through our own wounds do we gain the ability to heal others. Yet the danger is the empath mistakes this wound for identity, building a life around tending others' pain rather than transforming the self. When you feel another's sorrow, your instinct is to soothe it. That instinct arises because something within you recognizes that sorrow's frequency. The other's pain resonates with the unhealed within you. It is not that you attract wounded people. It is that your unconscious seeks reflection, a mirror through which it might finally see what has long been hidden. This is why so many empaths entangle with the broken, the lost, the narcissistic, the chaotic. It is not punishment. It is magnetism, the law of psychic resonance. In truth, the empath's world is shaped by mirrors. You do not see people as they are. You see them as aspects of your own psyche wearing human faces. That is why you are both fascinated and exhausted by them. The more you understand this, the more you reclaim your power. For when you realize others' emotions are invitations, not obligations, you begin to awaken from projection's unconscious trance. I have said before, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. For the empath, fate often appears as endless caretaking, endless disappointment, endless absorption of others' pain. But it is not fate. It is the unconscious seeking wholeness. The empath's task is to bring awareness into feeling, to turn the flood of sensation into clarity. The wounded healer archetype manifests in dreams as doctors who cannot cure themselves, as bleeding hands that heal others, as light shining through bodily cracks. The message is always the same. Your gift and your wound are the same door. The question is not how to close it, but how to walk through it consciously. To do so, you must embrace solitude. Solitude for the empath is not isolation, but recalibration. It is in silence your inner compass realigns. When alone, you are not abandoned. You are finally undisturbed. The collective emotions that swirled around you recede, and your own soul's voice becomes audible again. Only then can you distinguish what is yours from what is not. In that quiet, you begin to see empathy is not about carrying the world's suffering. It is about witnessing it. Witnessing is the sacred act through which energy transforms. When pain is seen with consciousness, it begins to dissolve. The empath, therefore, is not a sponge, but a mirror polished by compassion. Yet witnessing demands strength. The empath must develop a spine as sensitive as their heart. This is wholeness's paradox. Your sensitivity must be matched by solidity. Otherwise, you become fluid without form, a sea without shore. Boundaries are not walls. They are the structure allowing empathy to express itself without collapse. Think of the chalice, a sacred cup holding liquid without spilling. The empath must become such a vessel. The chalice's walls do not reject the wine. They shape it. Similarly, your boundaries do not deny love. They give it form. Without them, empathy becomes chaos, a flooding of soul drowning both giver and receiver. Many of you carry guilt for saying no, for withdrawing, for needing rest. This guilt is your conditioning shadow, the belief love must always give, that goodness requires exhaustion. But I tell you, fatigue is not holiness. There is no virtue in depletion. The divine does not demand your burnout. It desires your balance. Every time you choose to preserve your energy, you are not rejecting the world. You are maintaining the temple through which the world may heal. The unconscious respects those who respect themselves. When you draw a boundary, you're teaching the universe how to treat your light. You see, the empath's perception is sacred precisely because it touches the archetypal. When you feel another's pain, you're not touching a single story, but humanity's collective wound. The Christ archetype, the Buddha archetype, all carry this awareness, the knowledge that every suffering being mirrors the cosmic longing for reunion. Empathy is not sentimental. It is spiritual intelligence, the recognition the divine is fragmented within creation and seeks wholeness through feeling. Yet this consciousness must descend into the human. The empath who floats too high in spiritual idealism loses touch with reality. They may speak of energy, vibration, light, while neglecting life's practical aspects, money, body, time, space. But the soul incarnated to experience form. Without grounding, empathy becomes fantasy. Without embodiment, it becomes delusion. Therefore, learn to anchor your awareness in the body. The body is the instrument through which empathy becomes embodied wisdom. Feel your feet on the ground, your breath moving through your chest, your heart's rhythm. The body does not lie. It tells you when energy is yours or foreign. It contracts when boundaries are crossed, expands when truth is near. The body is your compass in the invisible world. The empath's challenge is not to feel less, but to feel with awareness. When you walk through a crowded space and emotions surge within you, pause, breathe. Ask, is this mine? Then listen to the subtle answer within your gut, not your mind. The mind confuses. The body knows. Over time, you will learn to discern not by analysis, but by vibration. I must also tell you of another shadow, the empath's addiction to pain. It sounds paradoxical, but many empaths unconsciously seek suffering because it gives them purpose to help, fix, heal. These become identities. Without someone to save, they feel lost. But this is not compassion. It is attachment. The true healer heals because they cannot do otherwise, not because they need to be needed. Let go of the savior complex. The world does not require saving. It requires awakening. Your role is not to rescue others from their darkness, but to hold a lantern so they may see their own path. Each soul must walk through its shadow alone. If you take that away, you steal their initiation. Compassion without respect becomes interference. As you evolve, empathy transforms into something quieter, wiser, almost transparent. You begin to feel everything, yet nothing overwhelms you. You sense the world's suffering as a vast ocean, yet you stand at its shore, unafraid. You know all of it. The joy, the agony, the love, the loss, are waves in the same divine sea. You do not resist them anymore. You let them pass through you like wind through branches. This is the empath's enlightenment. Feeling without drowning, loving without losing, seeing without judgment. At this stage, you no longer call yourself an empath, for empathy has dissolved into awareness itself. You simply are. But such mastery does not come quickly. It is born through many initiations, heartbreaks, betrayals, fatigue, spiritual awakenings. Each teaches you how to remain awake amidst intensity. The empath's path is not easy, for it mirrors humanity's journey from unconscious suffering to conscious unity. Remember, your perception is not an accident. It is an evolutionary step. Humanity long separated intellect from feeling, self from other. The empath represents the heart's return as an organ of perception. You are part of the psyche's evolution toward wholeness. The very sensitivity you curse is the bridge between eras of consciousness. So when you stand before the world's chaos, the violence, apathy, sorrow, do not despair. See it as the collective shadow rising to be healed. Feel it, but do not be consumed. Hold it in your awareness like a sacred wound, and let your compassion illuminate it. This is how transformation occurs, one conscious heart at a time. You are not small. You are not fragile. You are a nerve ending of the divine, the universe feeling itself. Every tear you shed is holy water. Every tremor of your heart is creation remembering itself. And in that remembering, the world begins to awaken. There comes a moment in every empath's journey, a moment of sacred exhaustion, when you can no longer carry what was never yours to bear. The tears stop not because the world is healed, but because something inside understands it was never your task to mend the infinite. This moment is not defeat. It is initiation. It is the crossing from identification to illumination, from being of the world's pain to being aware of it. At this threshold, the empath ceases to act from sentiment and begins to act from consciousness. You no longer respond to suffering out of reflex. You respond from clarity. You begin to see love, truly understood, is not about merging but about illuminating. The highest form of empathy is awareness itself, the ability to hold existence's whole in your perception without collapsing into it. This is what mystics meant by divine detachment. It is not coldness, not indifference, but the spaciousness allowing all things to exist without interference. To love this way is to reflect God's gaze, seeing everything, judging nothing, holding all with quiet compassion. Empaths see the world differently because they stand between human and divine, between personal and archetypal. They perceive every emotion, story, chaos as part of a greater symphony, dissonant at times, but always striving toward harmony. The world's suffering, seen through awakened empathy, becomes not a burden but a revelation. It reveals how consciousness is learning through experience. If you listen deeply, you can hear this learning in motion. One person's fear echoes the collective's uncertainty. One heart's grief reverberates through generations. One child's joy sings of the future. To see this web, to feel it, is to know interconnectedness as truth, not as philosophy, but as reality. This knowing changes how you live. You begin to move through the world like a lucid dreamer, awake within the dream, aware every encounter is symbolic, every conflict a reflection, every love a mirror of divine longing for reunion. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And begin asking, what is this showing me about the whole? This is the cosmic empath's birth, the soul that feels not for personal healing, but for collective awakening. You begin to sense not only individual emotions, but entire epochs of the human condition moving through you. Modernity's loneliness, civilization's restlessness, the earth's forgotten grief. At first this can feel unbearable, but as your consciousness expands, so does your capacity to hold it. You discover awareness is infinite. It has no walls. Then something extraordinary happens. You begin to perceive light within pain. You sense even the darkest emotion contains a spark of transformation, a seed of meaning. The despair that once crushed you now reveals wisdom. The rage that once frightened you now reveals power. The sorrow that once isolated you now connects you to everything that lives. Thus, Empathy becomes transfiguration, the alchemical process through which darkness turns to light within awareness's vessel. You do not escape the world. You redeem it through consciousness. But redemption begins within. You cannot awaken humanity if you still reject parts of yourself. Every feeling you suppress becomes part of the collective shadow. Every emotion you integrate becomes medicine for the whole. Therefore, the greatest service you can offer is to make peace within your own psyche. The empath's individuation, then, is not to become less feeling, but to become a transparent channel through which feeling flows unhindered. The self, the psyche's divine core, does not avoid emotion. It illumines it. When you identify with the self rather than the ego, you realize you are not the one who feels, but that which is aware of feeling. You are the space in which joy and sorrow appear and disappear. You are the stillness beneath the waves. In that stillness, all opposites reconcile. The duality between self and other dissolves. You no longer perceive through empathy's pain, but through unity's peace. The boundaries that once hurt become sacred lines of creation, not prisons. The world remains chaotic, but you no longer resist its chaos. You understand, even disorder is part of wholeness's unfolding. This is what I have called self-realization. The moment you cease living as a fragment and awaken as totality expressing itself through form. The empath at this stage becomes something beyond healer, beyond sensitive, beyond identity. You become an instrument of consciousness itself, a silent witness through which divine intelligence feels its own creation. I have seen this awakening in the eyes of those who suffered most. There's a particular light in them, calm, deep, unshakable. They have known despair intimately, and through that intimacy found peace. They no longer seek to escape feeling. They allow it to pass like seasons. Their empathy has become wisdom, their sensitivity, strength. When you reach this state, your presence alone heals. You need not speak. You need not try. Others feel peace around you, not because you absorb their pain, but because you no longer amplify it. Your stillness reflects their stillness. Your awareness mirrors their forgotten wholeness. You become like the moon upon the water, luminous yet untouched. To live like this is not to withdraw, but to participate consciously. You may still feel sadness, still weep, still love passionately, but behind every emotion remains a quiet knowing. This, too, is part of the whole. That knowing turns suffering into depth and joy into gratitude. Empaths see the world differently because they see it as soul. Where others see matter, you see meaning. Where others see coincidence, you see pattern. Where others see strangers, you see reflections. You know, everything is speaking. Every color, sound, silence. The world is alive with symbol. And empathy is the language through which it communicates. Yet the most beautiful truth is this. Once you awaken fully, you realize empathy was never about others at all. It was the self learning to recognize itself in disguise. Every emotion you ever felt, yours or another's, was a message from totality calling you home. Home is not a place. It is not peace without chaos or love without loss. Home is the awareness containing it all. Home is the moment you stop fighting what you feel. It is the moment you finally say, I am both the wound and the healer, both the ocean and the shore, both the one who feels and the one who observes. In that moment, something ancient within you exhales. You understand empathy was never meant to hurt you. It was meant to wake you. So let the world be as it is. Let it cry. Let it laugh. Let it tremble. Do not close your heart, but do not drown either. The empath's purpose is not to end the dance, but to see it clearly, to remember the same force moving through pain also moves through beauty. When you remember this, you become free. You no longer need the world peaceful to be at peace. You no longer need others to understand. You no longer seek validation for your sensitivity. You know what you are, the eye through which the universe feels itself. If you listen deeply, you can hear that truth's whisper. Even now, it says you're not too sensitive. You are exquisitely alive. You are not broken. You are open. You are not here to fix the world. You are here to love it into awareness. That is what it means to see the world differently. It is not a curse. It is wisdom's beginning. So I end not with an answer, but an invitation. Feel the world, but as awareness, not burden. Love deeply, but as truth, not rescue. Walk gently, for everything you touch is yourself in another form. For the awakened empath, the entire world becomes a mirror of the soul, shimmering with meaning, whispering all is one. And in that whisper, you will finally recognize what you have been searching for all along. Not understanding, not relief, but presence. The divine gaze looking through your human eyes, seeing the world at last as it truly is, whole, alive, eternal.